Joe Leigh here for Seconds Out. Delighted to be joined by top broadcaster Clarke. Once again, we're here in Central London, the Secret Boxing Gym. Joyce's open workout. How are you, first of all? How's things?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good. Been enjoying the nice weather. Had a little bit of time off in June, so that's good. You take the time off when you can get it. But was up at the Boxer card last Saturday, which was good, actually. The show in Coventry on Sky, and then this one, it's got a bigger feel to it because obviously Joyce is on it. Callum Johnson is a decent fight as well. So there's plenty going on at the minute.
Yeah, definitely a lot going on in boxing, but in the heavyweight division we obviously see Joyce, which we'll start with hopefully fighting Joe Parker soon. He calling him a duck and everything, saying he doesn't want the fight, etc, etc. But that fight, when it happens, if it happens, is one of the best in the heavyweight division.
It's a good fight if they can get it done. I remember being at Wembley for Fury against White, and we got Joe on, and he kind of, before they'd announced it on TV, he told us, he let it slip that he was there really because they were going to make that fight against Parker, and Parker then told us that although he'd agreed in principle, it wasn't done, and then it's fallen apart since then with Joe signing for Boxer. But that's not an insurmountable obstacle, hopefully. September the 24th, I think, is a date that's been mentioned, and I think it's a good fight for the pair of them, because the difficulty at the moment, and it has been for a while, if you're Joyce, I think his career's been moved really, really well, but it's built to this point, and what he needs now is a world title fight, and if you can't get him one of them, and they're very difficult to get, because over the last 3 years, say, if we go back 3 years to just after Joshua lost to Ruiz, very few people have got to fight for those belts because of rematches and trilogies and COVID. It's just, there's a queue. So if you can't get that, you need to get a meaningful fight against another contender in the meantime, and there aren't that many people around who are necessarily going to want to fight Joyce, because if you lose, or are going to want to go into that kind of fight, because if you lose, then you get knocked out of the frame. That's the difficulty with it, really, and that's really why Joyce hasn't had a fight for, it's a year. I couldn't quite believe it when I looked at the record the other day, because I was at that fight against Takam, but he hasn't boxed for a year, not for lack of trying, but that's just how things are.
How boxing works. Sometimes, obviously, we have AJ Usyk round the corner now. It seems like it's been round the corner for a long time, but it is happening. It's happening in Saudi. Robert Garcia is the man who will be in AJ's corner. The guy that's been in since December. They've been working together. But how much difference do you feel that'll make to AJ after, obviously, a tough first fight?
It's really difficult to know, because how much can you teach someone or change someone in the course of a few weeks? I don't think you can necessarily do all that much. You can maybe bring a different mindset and mentality, or help change that, or get that right. You might be able to make some little adjustments. I've always found his training setup really kind of interesting, Anthony, because at the start of his career, we all knew he was being trained by Rob McCracken, but nobody could say it, and he wasn't allowed in the corner, which is never ideal. Then eventually he was. The first fight was Klitschko that he was allowed in the corner, and then after the defeat against Ruiz, he made changes, and now he's made more. I'm not really a big fan of him being in Loughborough. I know that's where Angel's based, and I know he's got a good setup there, but I just don't think that you should be in an environment where it's even remotely possible for a bunch of students to wind you up. I think you should be away from all of that. But it's his decision. And I struggle to see him winning the rematch, to be honest. It's definitely not impossible. There's no way you could ever say that. But I really do struggle to see him turning that one around. And I think Usyk will be even, more confident the second time around, having done it once.
Yeah, and it's confusing, all the TV deals, etc., etc. Obviously, Sky will no longer be working with AJ. Obviously, DAZN, they've announced that long-term deal, but we still don't yet know who's actually broadcasting the fight.
No, that is interesting, because when the fight was finally confirmed for the 20th, and it looked like it was going to be July the 23rd for a long time, we were waiting to see whether he would stay with Sky or go with DAZN. I kind of always thought he would go with DAZN, just because he's so tight with Matchroom, obviously, and Matchroom had gone with DAZN, and they were obviously, well, I mean, it always looked like they would put more money on the table. They would just outbid, and money talks, doesn't it? Ultimately, in pretty much every situation, and I don't have a problem with that. But the timing of the announcement, I think, has maybe not gone down brilliantly. With the timing of the announcement of Anthony signing with DAZN has maybe not gone down brilliantly with the Saudis, because they've got the fight, they've got the rights to sell, and what I was hearing was that they would prefer it to be on Sky. That they would prefer it if Sky showed it. Just I'd imagine because Sky did the previous one and it went well, and but maybe Sky aren't keen because Joshua's left them, and it would just be a one-off, and what's in it for them really. So it's going to have to get resolved fairly soon, but it's just a good example of how complicated these big fights are to make. Even though there's a rematch clause that's been activated in it, and it would seem about as straightforward as it can be, nothing's ever straightforward, is it ever?
One thing I would say though, although it's difficult to make fights, always has been, the Undisputed fights with women's divisions and men's as well, there's becoming more over the last year or two, and that's a good thing for boxing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I remember I commentated on Terence Crawford against Julius Indongo in 2017, and at that point, Crawford became the 4th undisputed champion. We'd had Hopkins, Jermaine Taylor, Cecilia Brækhus, and then him. And since then, there's been, where we had one in Haney the other week, we've had Usyk, Josh Taylor. I mean, I always counted Lopez and therefore Kambosos myself for obvious reasons. Charlo as well. There's been a raft of them in the women's. Shields, McCaskill, Taylor, DAZN, Cruz. I'm missing people out probably, and it's great. But in a way, against Paul Butler, that looks like it'll probably happen. So we'll get a fight for Undisputed there. But with the heavyweights, it's always been difficult because the 4 belts have been in the possession of 2 people. The identities have changed, but of 2 people for a really long time now. And at no point really have we got close. The most obvious window was Joshua Wilder. I had about a year to do that before AJ unexpectedly lost, and it never got done. And it just seems so common sense that Fury will come out of retirement, or if you ever believed he was in retirement, and fight the winner of the fight on August the 20th. That would just seem to be so obvious, but it doesn't mean it'll happen.
There's so many fights in the heavyweight division, and we've spoken about the Undisputed, etc., etc. Shields Marshall seems like it's been closed for a while now. If it's September the 10th, it's September the 10th. But for women's boxing, for the sport of boxing, what do you think that does? And it's a great fight as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big fight. It's a big fight, and I know Sky will get absolutely behind that. I was speaking to someone the other day, and they said that plans are in place, and it's going to be the way they're going to drive that and promote it, and what they're going to make of it is going to be quite kind of epic in scale, I think. And obviously Matchroom pushed Serrano, Taylor as hard as they possibly could, and it was a great event and it was a great success. But they don't have the reach that Sky have got. They just don't, and that's one of the things that Matchroom have had to contend with since going with DAZN. So I think that Sky machine will crank up and come into full operation for that fight, and it is a really good fight. I don't think myself that it's as big purely in a boxing sense as Taylor Serrano. I thought that was just a great fight and really delivered, but there's no doubt that it's going to be a big event, definitely.
Okay, so on to celebrity boxing. I hate to bring it up now. Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, seems like it'll be happening August the 9th. Obviously there's been pull-outs before, but it's happening. How do you see that? I'm interested to see your point, because obviously you come from the traditional broadcasting background. Obviously Jake Paul's a YouTube boxer in a sense. Obviously you'll say maybe not a YouTube boxer anymore, but how do you see that fight going, and kind of thoughts overall on the whole YouTube boxing thing?
Well, this is the first one of these that I'm genuinely really interested in, because and the reason is that I've never had a problem with YouTubers or celebrities or anyone boxing. They can do what they like, and any publicity that gets drawn to the sport can never be a bad thing. My problem with them originally, when Logan Paul and KSI boxed for the second time in LA, and I was working for Sky at the time, although I wasn't out there for that, but I was part of the whole kind of thing that we had to get behind. My problem at that point was that I just didn't think they should be licensed as professionals, and they never would have been in the UK, but in America you can always find a commission who'll do what you want to do if it's going to bring in some money, because the standard just wasn't good enough. And I stick to that right up until now, because Fury is a legitimate professional boxer, and you could argue that Jake Paul is showing enough now that you could say that he is too, and that therefore this is the first fight involving anyone like him where you will watch it and what they are doing in there will be recognisable as proper boxing. Because the other fights, I commentated on this fight against Anderson Gibb, and it was laughable, to be honest with you. And I did the one with the basketball player Nate Robinson, and again Robinson, he's an athlete, but he hadn't done a scrap of boxing training, and it was a joke. Just what we were watching. But this won't be. I think this will be, because he trains Jake Paul, he's improved. This will be a proper. This is professional boxing, and for that reason, for the first time, I'm interested in it, and I don't really know who's going to win it. Tommy Fury, given his background and the amount of time that he's been boxing, you would say that he should win. But he's been up and down in his pro career. He's been quite lukewarm. Has he really dedicated himself to it? Even his dad has said at times that he hasn't. So I don't know. But fair play to Jake Paul for doing it, because he's been talking for a long time about how he's going to become world champion and all the rest of it, and that's, if he thinks that, then that's fine. But this is the first step, fighting a pro.
How far can this whole scene go? Obviously, you've worked for the broadcasters Sky when KSI Logan Paul happened. You've seen the numbers it can generate. How far do you think this can go?
I mean, I don't know about numbers and stuff like that, but for me, it seemed to have kind of lost its way a little bit after that first fight between, or the second fight between KSI and Logan Paul in LA on Sky Box Office and everything that went behind that, because that was fine as a one-off, but it wasn't really something that you would want to watch again. I didn't think, because I've never really understood the whole idea of watch people from a different kind of universe try their hand at something and do it quite badly. I don't get it. I don't understand why you would want to watch someone dance badly or box badly or bake a fucking cake badly. I don't get it. And after that, I thought it was on the downward spiral. But this, I think, pulls it back up there again, because, as I say, this is a proper fight. And if he can win, Jake Paul, and keep going and try and step up levels, I think people will remain interested in it. But I'm not really the audience, you see. Like, I would remain interested in it because I would want to see him actually box professionals, proper professionals, and see how far he can get. But the people who follow him, they might not want that. They might just want to see him box another famous person.